"He took my sister!" yelled the 10-year-old boy, but no one believed him until the van stopped. "He took my sister!" Jake's voice cracked as he shouted through the crowded street, his small hands trembling, eyes wide with fear no child should ever know. The late afternoon sun was fading fast, shadows stretching over the cracked sidewalks of Elmwood. But no one stopped. They just glanced away, busy with their own lives. 10-year-old Jake ran after a plain white van that was speeding down Maple Avenue, clutching a worn photo of his little sister Emily. "Please, someone help," he begged. But the busy neighbors just shook their heads, whispering that the boy was making things up again. Sarah Collins, a nurse walking home from her shift, noticed Jake's desperation. Her heart tightened as she caught sight of the van disappearing around the corner, the driver's face hidden behind darkened windows. Without hesitation, Sarah sprinted after Jake, her mind racing. Could she do something before it was too late? That day, in the quiet town where everyone thought they knew their neighbors, a terrifying truth was about to surface. And no one would ever be the same again. Jake wasn't just a scared kid shouting for help. His fear was buried beneath layers of quiet resilience. His small frame trembled, but his eyes held something deeper than panic. A fierce determination no one around seemed to notice. He never cried loudly or threw tantrums. Instead, he stood on the edges of playgrounds, watching, listening, waiting. Emily, his little sister, was the light of his world. A shy, gentle girl with a habit of clutching her favorite stuffed bunny when she felt unsure. Though she barely spoke, her silence wasn't emptiness, but a language of caution, learned too soon from a home that didn't always feel safe. Sarah Collins, the nurse, moved with calm urgency, her quick but measured steps telling a story of someone used to bearing heavy burdens quietly. She never rushed blindly. Instead, she scanned every face in the crowd, searching for clues. When she finally knelt down beside Jake, her eyes softened, not with pity, but with recognition. She saw a boy whose silence had screamed louder than any words ever could. Around them, the hum of the city continued, voices, footsteps, the occasional honk. But in that moment, silence spoke louder. Jake's clenched fists, Emily's faded, photo crumpled in his palm, and Sarah's steady gaze all told a story that words hadn't yet dared to say aloud. Just as Jake's breath hitched in despair, a car pulled up abruptly at the corner, its headlights cutting through the dim streetlight like a beacon. The van's door swung open, and out stepped a man who didn't look like a typical hero. His clothes were simple, his hands rough from years of hard work, but his eyes held a fierce kindness that immediately cut through the chaos. Tom Bennett wasn't a stranger to pain or loss. Once a school teacher, now working nights to make ends. Meet, Tom's life had been shaped by second chances, and he recognized one right there in Jake's trembling voice. Without hesitation, Tom closed the distance, kneeling beside the boy as if time itself slowed down. "Hey, buddy," Tom said gently, his voice steady but urgent. "Tell me what's going on. Who took your sister?" Jake's eyes flickered up, searching for doubt or disbelief, but all he found was genuine concern. It was the first time in hours someone didn't dismiss his cry as a child's wild imagination. Emily's name caught on Jake's trembling lips. He took her," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant city noises. "In the white van, by the park." Tom's jaw tightened. He didn't waste a second. Without waiting for confirmation or questioning the wild fear in the boy's eyes, he sprang into action. He called 911 with one hand, while the other reached out to steady Jake, offering a quiet reassurance that things could still change. After the frantic call, Tom didn't rush Jake into talking more than he could handle. Instead, he led him to the nearby diner, the one with the flickering neon sign and the comforting hum of late-night chatter. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them like a shield against the cold fear lurking outside. Tom ordered 2 hot chocolates, one with extra marshmallows just like a kid would want, and sat across from Jake, keeping his tone calm and steady. He didn't push, didn't demand answers. He simply listened, giving Jake the space to breathe and to start feeling safe. Jake fiddled with the edge of his sleeve, eyes darting nervously around the room, unsure if this place could really be a refuge. But Tom's quiet presence was different from the chaos he'd left behind. No harsh words, no judgment, only steady patience. Minutes passed, filled with small silences that didn't feel empty but rather held the weight of understanding. Tom shared a little about himself. how he'd lost his sister years ago, and how sometimes all you need is one person who believes you. That admission broke something in Jake. He looked up, meeting Tom's eyes for the first time without fear. Slowly, the boy began to unravel his story, not in bursts, but in fragile threads woven carefully, as trust grew between them. Tom never interrupted or dismissed the boy's fears, no matter how wild they sounded. Instead, he affirmed them gently, nodding as if to say, "I hear you. You're not alone." In that humble diner, surrounded by strangers but cocooned in unexpected safety, Jake found his first real refuge since the nightmare began. The fear was still there, lingering in shadows, but for the first time, it shared space with a fragile hope. As the warmth of the diner settled around them, Jake's defenses began to crumble. His small hands trembled as he clutched the nearly empty hot chocolate cup, and the words he had been holding back for so long started to pour out, heavy and raw. "He wasn't just some stranger," Jake whispered, voice cracking with every syllable. "It was Mr. Thompson, the man from the neighborhood." His eyes darkened, haunted by memories that refused to fade. "He said he was going to take Emily for a little while, but he never brought her back." Tom leaned in closer, his face a mixture of shock and quiet fury. But he stayed calm, knowing this was Jake's moment to tell his truth, not his to react. The boy's voice faltered, tears spilling over as the memories overwhelmed him. "Mom didn't believe me, said I was imagining things," Jake said, voice barely above a sob. "Dad was never around, and when I told my teacher, she just smiled and changed the subject." The weight of years of silence and disbelief crashed down in that small diner booth. Jake's story wasn't just about a missing sister. It was about being ignored, unseen, unheard. Tom's eyes softened with determination. "You did the right thing by telling me, Jake. We're going to make sure everyone listens now, buddy." The first time in a long time, Jake felt a flicker of hope, the burden of isolation easing just enough to let courage creep in. The night outside remained cold and unforgiving, but inside a fragile alliance had formed, one that promised Jake he wouldn't face the darkness alone anymore. Days later, armed with new resolve, Jake and Tom arrived at the old neighborhood where the nightmare had begun. The familiar streets that once held childhood memories now felt heavy with shadows. Jake's steps were hesitant at first, but Tom's steady presence beside him gave courage he hadn't known he possessed. They approached Mr. Thompson's rundown house, the very place Jake had described with trembling clarity. The door was cracked open, as if waiting for this reckoning. Tom dialed the police, then knelt beside Jake, whispering, "This time, you're not alone. We're going to face this together." Inside, the air was thick with neglect and secrets. Jake's heart pounded, but he pushed forward, recalling every detail he had buried deep. When the officers arrived, Jake's voice was steady, stronger than before, as he pointed out evidence, naming every fear he had held back for years. Suddenly, Mr. Thompson appeared in the doorway, his eyes darting nervously. Jake didn't flinch. He looked at the man who had stolen his sister, and instead of fear, a quiet strength shone through his gaze. The past was no longer a prison. "This ends now," Jake said, voice firm. "No more hiding." The officers moved swiftly, arresting Mr. Thompson as Jake watched, the weight of years beginning to lift. Tom placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder, proud of the boy's bravery. In that moment, the haunting silence of the past was broken, replaced by the fierce light of justice, and the first true step toward healing. Weeks after the confrontation, Jake stood quietly in the backyard of his new home, the fresh paint on the fence gleaming softly in the afternoon sun. This place, once just a shelter, had slowly transformed into a sanctuary where he and his sister could finally breathe freely. Clutching a small box, Jake knelt by the garden bed where wildflowers had begun to bloom. Inside the box were items he'd carried in silence for years: faded photographs, a broken music box, a worn-out teddy bear. Each one held memories of pain, but also of love and resilience. With deliberate care, he began to bury the box beneath the soil, a ritual of letting go. As the earth covered the relics of his past, Jake felt a weight lifting from his chest. This Act wasn't just about burying the pain. It was reclaiming his story, rewriting it on his own terms. Beside him, his sister Lily reached out and took his hand, her eyes shining with newfound hope. "We're safe now," she whispered. Jake nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle deep inside. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, as if the world itself was blessing their healing. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the promise of growth and new beginnings, Jake understood that closure wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to move forward, stronger than before. Together they rose, ready to step into the light of their future, no longer bound by the shadows of the past. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?